Welcome back to the Senior Hour. I'm Barbara Cochran with my co-host, Dr. Jean Dorio, on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. And Dr. Kalani has still not arrived, so we're kind of on our own, Jean.
Well, and that's okay because,
Yes.
it's the beginning of life, not the end of life. But, our issues that take place in this community are about, a lot of them because of the senior population, is about end of life.
That's true.
And, we've had that discussion earlier in the first segment about how one must be prepared for end of life, mentally, physically, emotionally, and families must also. But legally, that preparation has to be made as well. And so it is important that our seniors know about the legal paperwork. And certainly you don't have to go to see an attorney. You can go online. There's so many things that are out there that even advanced directives, you can cross out things, put things in, read the fine print, make sure you can do all the paperwork and then take it to an attorney to have them read over it and make sure that it's what you want. But it is a way of making and assuring that your voice, should you not be able to have that voice at the moment, but your wants and needs are going to be listened to by the doctors, the nurses, your family, everybody, should something terrible and catastrophic happen. So we need to make sure our seniors hear what we're saying today, and this is all the things that are being pushed out there into the population. But a lot of people just go, not going to happen to me because I'm, like I said earlier, 98 years old and I'm going to still live for a while.
I'm invincible.
Mm-hmm. So you always want to try to get that advance directive. You always want to make sure that people know what you want done. The most important thing that when you are in a hospital, the most important thing that you can have, and I always ask this question when I give my lecture, what's the most important thing you should have when you're in a hospital? And people will say their social security card or your iPad and things like that, and I'll go, no, it's an advocate. You need to have a person who will speak for you, and you have to designate that person legally so they know, everybody knows who that is, because if then you're going to have surgery, or if you're going to have a special procedure, or something's abnormal, or your prognosis has changed, you want the doctors especially to be able to say, okay, here's a phone number, call that advocate up, and make sure that that advocate is acting for the loved one who's in the hospital.
Yeah, that's very, very important. And, it's interesting because my granddaughter and her husband came over Sunday afternoon to spend the afternoon with us, and they brought their children, which 2 great-granddaughters. And one of them had just had a 4 birthday. So Russ and I had bought a whole bag full of stuff, and it was just so exciting watching her take out all of these little items, puzzles and crayons and all kinds of little things. And I was thinking there, just thinking to myself, this mother and father are preparing for their children, and their children are going to grow up and at some point possibly take care of them. And the thought went through my mind that, gee, they're a long way off from us. Long way meaning Huntington Beach, which to me is a long way off, because they're not within 30 minutes of us, and I'm thinking, wow, they have a full life ahead of them, and so do their children. And are they aware of some of the things they need to do? And we kind of touched on a little bit of that, but then it with 2 little girls running around and excited and into this and into that, the conversation just kind of died.
We when we're younger, feeling invincible, we get life insurance because that's, just in case something should happen. But, for the most part, that's never cashed in. You get to 65 and all of a sudden they turn around and, you look at the tables, and I actually was looking for life insurance, but of course, if you're 65 or older, you're done. You can't get life insurance, it seems. So, but you're always looking ahead at that time when you're younger, but when you're older, this is a time and a moment where now, you've made it through life. You've done all the things you wanted to do. You've accumulated things. You want to be able to make sure everything goes right in the process if something goes wrong. So, we have to think ahead. We always do. We get that advance directive and we decide, at what point do we say it is end of life? That's it. I mean, there's an article in the Los Angeles Times that talked about an emergency room doctor in Oakland, and a patient came in and was suffering, and she had been in a nursing home and she had no family, which is pretty sad, but she had gone over paperwork to allow doctors and nurses and everybody else to go in the direction that she wanted her life to go.
Right.
But it was even at that point, even though the doctor was fully aware, had the paperwork in his hand, still the actual implementation of her wishes, because he knew her wishes were not to continue. And so often for us as physicians, our job is to allow people to continue, to heal them, to make them better, to get them back to their families and their homes. But here, he's in the emergency room, he's seen the patient before, but he knows there is now paperwork. And she has discussed these issues with others in authority and said, this is what I want. And it was clear for the situation this emergency room doctor was facing, he was going to make a decision on her behalf. And that's what he did. And she passed away. But she was fully aware that it was end of life. And he made sure that she was not in pain, she was not suffering, and she was not uncomfortable. These were all the important things. And followed what she wanted. Because now it was there. Even without family, she was able to designate exactly and delineate exactly what she wanted her end of life.
That's right. That's right. And the doctor had to honor that request.
Absolutely. And he did.
And I think that would be hard for me if I was a doctor to follow through with that, even though I understand and that she has a right to make those decisions and have a doctor follow through with them.
When you read you can go to the Los Angeles Times. It's Wednesday today. I think it was on Sunday's Los Angeles Times, but they have a comment section, and many of the comments reflected the difficulty that was written by the author, the doctor, how, and reflective of how hard it was to fulfill what she wanted in her life. But he did it. And everybody said, thank you, you did the right thing, and you would honor me if you were my doctor at the very end, because you did exactly what she wanted. So these are all things that, in preparation, and it didn't seem like she had been that prepared, because she didn't have an advocate, she didn't have family members. But yet at some point, her mind was still there, and at some point someone sat down with her and said, what would you like us to do in the future? How far do you want us to go? How do you want us to deal with this? And in that discussion with her, she was able to turn around and give her feelings and the direction she wanted, so her voice continued to be heard, even though she couldn't be heard.
Couldn't be heard, right?
And she said, at the end, when she came in, the emergency room doctor said, she said to him, I think I'm going to die. That's what she said. Now, I have had patients say that and go home later, and so people sense and feel it because they're know that something is going wrong, that they're not going to make it out. So that has happened to me, but she sensed that this time, and it was true. And so he was aware that she knew that, and but because of the paperwork that she had drawn up legally, he was okay with fulfilling her wish.
Yeah, even though it would have been hard for him. I'm sure it was.
Yeah.
Because doctors, that Hippocratic oath.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to, and it's good that we have that, because we feel we need to honor that. But I have had patients who have come into our hospital, and they have asked. I had one patient who lived here in Newhall, and she, every time she would come in, she would ask me, "Is this it?
Oh my goodness.
Is this?" And I tell you, over probably around 5 years, she was admitted 6 or 7 times over those 5 years. But each time I recollect, she would say, "Is this it, Dr. Dorio? Is this it?"
Oh, wow.
And I would say to her, I don't know, but I'll be able to tell you, in a few hours or tomorrow, but, I doesn't seem that way. I'd give her, kind of a fluid answer, but, the next day, because I knew the next day she would ask, "Well, how do you think?" And, most of the time she was feeling better, so she knew it wasn't it.
Right.
And eventually she, lived at home, in her own home, had her bedroom, and she had family had a caregiver, and family was all around. And she went home, and I remember I had seen her in the hospital, and she didn't look really good. She was in her 90s, I think, late 90s, and she didn't feel real good. But she was able to go home, and she always wanted to be at home. And I remember I did a house call on her and saw her, and usually when I went to her home, she was in her living room, and she had a TV, and she'd be watching TV or something, and she always had her routine. But this time I went, and she was not in her living room; she was in her bedroom. But she was sitting there, and she was okay and feeling fine. And I said, "How do you feel? You uncomfortable?" She was drinking some Gatorade probably, and she said, "No, I feel just fine. I'm okay, and no pain or anything." But I said, "Good. I'll see you in a few weeks." And I left. And what happened that night was around 2:00 in the morning, caregiver came in, and she had asked for some more water, Gatorade, and she said she got that, and she brought it to her, and she had a few sips, and then 10 minutes later she came back, and she had passed away. She had passed away at home. She had passed away with her own pillow, in her own bed, where she had lived for over 50 years, and she did not suffer at all.
That's a beautiful story, really, when you stop and think about it.
Yeah, because she lived her life the way she wanted to live it. She guided all her family members and myself in the way she wanted her life to end. And she always just anticipated that this was it, but and in asking that question. And then I think when the time and the moment came, she was questioning that, and the day I saw her at home, I think she was questioning that, but there was nothing on her physical exam or in her voice or in her symptoms that said this was it, even at home. But you just can't give up this great sense and feeling that she must have had, that she was at home. This was her home, where she raised her family
in her own bed.
In her own bed.
Yes. Well, that's the way.
With all the mementos around her, everything that meant something to her. Here she was, and that's the problem we have in our country. I mean, 90% of the people die in a hospital, and I think, and I hope within 10 years, 90% of the people will die at home where they want to be.
Well, that's where I want to die, unless I have some horrible illness or disease that I have to be in the hospital all the time. But I don't see that happening. I really don't.
Yeah, well, and I just think, because I do think we have this attitude that that's where people should be who are ill, but we are living so long that I can also pretty much tell when people are getting toward the end. It's not just a memory part of it, but physically especially, you can pretty much tell, and I call it pooping out. They just get, they're getting tired.
That's right.
And you can see,
That's
and
right. Getting pooped.
and we might do something called an echocardiogram in the hospital and measure their cardiac output, and everything that seems fine. But I can tell that they're getting tired. They're pooping, and they're struggling to hang in there. And I'll tell the family that as well, just to give them a forewarning. And I'm pretty good at seeing that. There's no physician in this world that can turn around and say, oh, you're going to die on March 22nd, 2026. Now, if I was able to do that, I'd have a line down the street.
That's right.
Around the world from my office.
You would.
So we can't do that.
No.
But I can, as a hospice and palliative care physician, I can tell when it's close. With my patients who we have on hospice care, I know pretty much that their end of life is really near. And so, and even I tell everyone that, like last year, I had 5 patients, none with cancer, all women in their 90s, who died at home with their family and their pets and the people around them. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's the way one gets to live life, but not everyone. But we have to make it so that it happens for everyone who gets that choice. And those 5 patients, I know the families especially were grateful that they did fine. They didn't suffer in the process. They were not in pain, and they just faded away. They pooped out, but they faded away. And they knew they were going, which was great. But they had family members holding their hands. They had all the things around them that gave them their memories. It's a wonderful thing to be able to do. And I think more and more people, like Dr. Kalani, will be doing that. More and more doctors will have their knowledge and their ability to give that to our patients.
It's interesting you talking about that, because my sister-in-law had kidney disease. The kidneys just weren't functioning, and she was over at not Henry Mayo, but in one of those kidney dialysis places right beside the hospital. Mm-hmm. And I would go over there with her and sit while she was going through that dialysis. And then she became so ill that we had to put her in the hospital. And we called hospice in. Mm-hmm. And there was always someone with her. Always, because she was on a constant drip because of the pain she was in. Wow. And that's where she died. She died in the hospital.
Yeah.
And I was there when it happened. But the hospice nurses were all there too, which really made a difference. And I used to feel comforted when I went home from visiting her that she was being taken care of. Mm-hmm. And that's so important.
Yeah.
And she knew she was being taken care of.
I think each one of us deserve that. Mm-hmm. Especially in our country. But when and we both are advocates for not only our seniors, but we're also advocates for our veterans.
Absolutely.
And we have said it many a time here that for those veterans who served, they should be given different efforts on the part of our society to help them with their education, help them with their home, to get them retuned back into society. Mm-hmm. I think that's mandatory. And if we're seeing that we're not doing that, how can we do that for our seniors, our elder seniors? And we're not. So that's why we have to turn around and say, okay, they're starting to focus more on the veterans, which is great. But after Vietnam, we didn't see that happen, and now we're starting to see it. Well, let's start focusing on our elder seniors so that they have the right to be able to live the way they've wanted to live, but also die the way they want to die.
Absolutely. I agree with you completely. And we need to take a break. I'm Barbara Cochran with my co-host, Dr. Jean Dorio, on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. Welcome back to the Senior Hour. I'm Barbara Cochran with my co-host, Dr. Jean Dorio, on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. And Dr. Kalani is still not here. We don't know what happened.
Well, she probably, like I said, she's probably is tied up, and her issues are she's an end-of-life physician, so she has to sustain that. And we've had a good discussion with our audience, our listening audience, about what she's doing and what end of life is. And in a hospital setting, so many people are facing that. For our elder seniors in this community, we have to mentally prepare them for those events that when you're in a hospital setting. And I will tell you that the catastrophe that takes place that I see, Barbara, sometimes is people who know they want a certain amount of effort put into maintaining them, but also know that sometimes they're not going to make it. And when they're leaning now toward that not going to make it, if their heart stops, if they start breathing, we as a hospital and as doctors have to save their life by law. We have to do CPR. We have to intubate, put them on a ventilator. We have to give them chemicals to sustain their blood pressure. We have to do all these things to rev them back up again. But lots of people don't want that. And so they get something called a DNR, do not resuscitate, put on their chart saying, if my heart stops, I'm gone. Thank you. It's my turn. It's my time. But if you don't have that, if you haven't told your physician or your advocate doesn't know, then we're going to do it. We don't have a choice in that. And that's one of our problems that we face sometimes in a setting where the communication hasn't been there or the thought hasn't been there, and people come in and they're sitting there going, I didn't want this done. The family will say, I didn't want this done, but we don't know that.
No, that's true.
So paperwork is out there in case one wants that to happen. You can tell your doctor, the staff, I don't want CPR. I don't want anyone pushing on my chest or giving me chemicals. I've lived a great life at this point, and I don't want, something that I know that won't be a great life sustained. I don't want that.
Well, that's why it's so important to have an advance directive.
Absolutely.
It really is.
That's a piece of it.
Yeah, and
then have the advocate there to speak for you if you need it.
Absolutely.
And these are the key things.
Be witness to you when you're saying to that doctor or that nurse or that hospital, whatever, I don't want to be resuscitated. Mm-hmm. I do not want to be resuscitated. Don't do this to me, to this and this to sustain my life. I don't want that.
Right. And there are different aspects of life. Sometimes people have emphysema and their lungs are going, and they don't want intubation, whereas others do want it in certain instances. For instance, I've had patients come into the hospital and they have pneumonia, but they do have a DNR, mm-hmm. which means do not intubate. But the point is they have a pneumonia, and my discussion becomes, because you have pneumonia, we can get you through the pneumonia, but we have to breathe for you to do that and intubate you. And they agree to that. They agree that, let's get you over the hump so we can get you out of here. You know how many times that has happened? Too many. And so even, nothing is strict in law, but when you put things down, the advocate has to know how flexible you want us to be, and that discussion needs to take place. And it circles back again to what we talked about in the very beginning, that if people aren't having the discussion right now, then it's futile.
That's right.
Then we are not going to know. You're not going to have that advocate. You're not going to be able to, have someone make the right decisions or have the right decisions made for you.
Yeah, that is so very important. And we urge all of your seniors out there listening to have a friend or your loved ones or your children or grandchildren, make sure they know what you want to do as far as the end of your life is concerned.
Absolutely.
It's extremely important. It really is.
And we talked earlier about the CAT scan in the 1970s and 80s, and when I started practicing, didn't have that CAT scan. Now we do. That technology has just really taken off.
Yes,
so
it
you can
has.
expect that we can do even more these days to allow you to survive and have quality of life. But the point is also, the minuscule part of this is that we've only come a short way in terms of what we know in terms of medical science, and we need to go further. So even though we think that we got the CAT scan and the MRI that's going to help us, and coronary angiograms, blah, 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 it's still not enough to allow us to live forever, and we're not going to.
No, that's very true.
So it's
That's
been,
very
it's a great discussion, but like you said, Barb, we have to have a sit down and make sure that we know what our patients want us to do. And, I don't think we want any holy hanas to, like you said in the beginning part of the show.
Holy cow.
I don't know if I've heard that term, but I think that it's part of what we don't want. So,
Well, I could have said holy cow, but that doesn't sound right. So I said holy Hannah.
that does sound better.
Yes, it does.
Great discussion, Barb.
Yes,
I hope
absolutely.
our listeners were listening
Let's
to what we
hope
had
so.
to say. We are sponsored by Advanced Audiology and SCV in Home Care. Listen to us next week on the Senior Hour. Now go and enhance your quality of life.